All right. Well, welcome everyone to this professional development webinar. Today we're joined by Dr. Nathan Connor here at the university. He's an assistant professor in the ALEC department and one of our teacher educators, and also serves as the superintendent for the Agriscience career development event. And so with that today, this year's theme is animal science, and specifically the practicum activity is fetal pig dissection. And so Dr. Connor is going to talk us through the event and then also demonstrate a fetal pig dissection and what your students can expect here on campus in April. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Connor.
Thank you, Matt. Well, welcome everyone that's joining us live and everyone that's going to watch this throughout the year as you start to work with your high school students to train your team. The first thing that I wanted to do was let you know that the Agriscience website that's on the UNL ALEC website should be up to date. After we do this recording here today, we will put this recording, the link to it, on the site as well. So you can go back to this recording as much as you want throughout the year. We also have the Agriscience CDE overview sheet that's currently online, which I know you can't see this very well. It is online right now for you to look at if you would like to or access it any time. And we also have all the official rules, regulations, and things of that nature. Please stop me at any time and ask me if you have any questions. That might be a better route than waiting till the end. We're going to try to get through some of the logistics of how the contest works fairly quickly so we can spend our time today actually dissecting the fetal pig so you can see how you might approach that with your high school students when you're training your team. So there's three components to this CDE like there is every year for this CDE. The first one is the exam.
Set it down there if you'd like.
The first one is the exam. It's going to be a 50-question multiple choice test like it has been in the past. There's going to be questions from the animal systems chapters that are tied to this particular event, as well as the general chapters. The particular chapters are all online, so I'll let you find those on our website. It tells you that there's 35 to 40 questions from the animal systems core material, and the remaining questions are from the optional material. With that, we do that every year.
Yeah.
With that information being online. So when your students come on April 5th, everybody is going to come to the Great Plains room and take the exam all at once. Please make sure your students come with number 2 pencils. That way everyone has pencils. Please make sure they have erasers. We had a little bit of a challenge with that last year, so please make sure they have erasers that work just in case they need to use them. The second component of the Agriscience CD is the home-based practica, which involves the career report. One of the changes to the career report this year, which will be online as well, your students pick a career and they write a report based off of the grading rubric, which is online. This year, we are only going to accept careers that connect to agriculture. So we're not going to take careers like YouTuber or things of that nature. Please make sure your students relate the career that they choose to agriculture. Any connection works, but how we're going to handle this is when I receive these documents in the mail, if we and myself decide that this is not related to agriculture, that particular student's report will be thrown out. It will not be graded, so it will receive a 0 out of 100 points. And we don't want that to happen to any of your students. So please help them choose a career interest that is related to agriculture. Are there any questions about that?
This is Jessica from Northwest. What format do you want that in? Do you want it bulleted? Do you want it paragraph format?
A paragraph format would be great. And all the requirements and content are online on the rubric. But please do not send just a bulleted list to answer the questions or provide the content that's on the rubric, but do a paragraph paper format. Wonderful. Then the third part is the fun part of the event, and that is the hands-on practica. This year, like Matt already mentioned, it is dissecting fetal pigs. So for that, the team will have about 45 minutes. It's teams of 4, and these are your younger 9th grade students. So 4 students will work together on dissecting the pig. With that, they're going to have to identify organs as well as know functions of the organs. The questions that are a part of the team practicum will be in multiple choice format for the students, and they'll primarily deal with the functions of the particular organs. There's a little more information on the Agriscience CDE overview about particular lab exercises that are in the lab book that we use. Exercise 37 in the 4th edition of the lab manual that we use, and all that information is online, so you can look at it or email or call me if you have any specific questions. It's simple digestion, but I want to point out the students are responsible for identifying and knowing the functions of any of the organs, not just what's in the digestive system. So we're going to go over the organs today, but for an example, they should be able to identify the heart and other organs, not just the organs that are talked about or used in exercise 37. So any questions about the format of the CDE? Well, we're hearing no questions. Let's move on to the fun part. So
I guess maybe I will ask one question.
Okay, sure.
How will they, and you're probably going to get into this, but how will they identify it? Will they be labeled on, the fetal pig and they have to write it on a worksheet, or is someone going to come around to them and say, point at the heart, or how's that going to work?
I am still making some decisions on that, but what I am thinking right now is that the students are going to be provided labels with type names on them that will last all 3 rounds, so they're not ruined by the messiness of the pig dissection. So then they're going to have to label them with those labels that are provided. The other way that I'm thinking about is to have the students actually take the organs out of the cavity and then have a sheet that has boxes that are labeled. So you put the heart in one spot, you put the liver in another spot. So they will have labels or a sheet that tells them where to set the organ. They won't have to handwrite the names of the organs. Okay, so one thing when you're preparing your team, or hopefully you're doing this with your whole class, I want to show you the fetal pigs that we're using. These pigs...
Actually, now the toward you is
towards me. All right. The fetal pigs that we are using this year come from Carolina Biological, and we've decided that we are going to use large fetal pigs. This is pigs that are 11 to 14 inches. So they're going to be very large. I think you can order them as small as 6 to 8 inches. However, since they're bigger, it's going to be a little bit easier for your students to identify organs, and it's also going to be less of a safety hazard when there are fingers and scalpels and scissors. So I would suggest that if possible, you order the larger pigs so that your students practice on what they're going to actually have to dissect the day of the CDE. So I'm going to walk you through the entire process of dissecting a pig, but I want to just say that there are lots of YouTube videos on how to dissect fetal pigs online. Each one of them takes a little bit of a different approach to the dissection. So there's not necessarily a correct or incorrect way unless we are totally butchering the fetal pig and we are cutting through the organs where we can't identify them. So this is just one way that works for me and that I'm going to share with you. So the first thing you're going to want to do with the fetal pig is take either the scissors out of your dissection kit. So this is the dissection kit that your students will be given at the event. It's just a basic kit with scissors and a scalpel. Some of the kits have scissors that have pointed blades, and some of the kits have scissors that have a point on one side and curved on the other. So it's really just going to depend which station your students are placed at to which type of scissor they have. So you may want them to prepare and practice with both, because if your student gets the kits that have the pointed end, it's a lot easier to pierce the organs as you cut versus the rounded end that you can make the point face upward. So they can see. All right, so to start with, you would just open the bag, and it's vacuum sealed. There is fluid in the bag, so have your students be very careful. And I forgot a step, 2 steps actually, which is very important because we want your students to be safe. Rubber gloves are needed. They will be provided for the students the day of the event. And then safety goggles, splash-proof safety goggles, which your students need to bring. All right. So now, just going to cut the top of the bag off. So I'm going to reach in with my hand and pull the pig out. Let it drain or you'll have a mess. All right. Face it down.
You bet.
Okay. So let's see where the pig is. All right. So what you want to do is you want to set the fetal pig ventral side up, so laying on its back where its stomach is facing up. We have very small dissection trays for this size of pig. These are the trays that are going to be at the contest. So the students will be given some string at the contest to help spread out the legs. So they need to take the string, tie a knot. I would do a couple times, but it's whatever is secure. And to me, this is one of the most challenging aspects of it all, because with the pig this size, the string isn't as necessary as it is, in my opinion, with a smaller fetal pig, but it could make it a little safer for your students. We have one end tied up and do the same with the other set of legs.
Put this camera back around so it matches when you're looking on the screen. Sorry if I'm getting you guys dizzy here. So.
And I took the string and just wrapped it under the dissection tray. And once I get it all done, that'll help spread the legs out some.
Your students may be tempted, because there's 4 of them that'll be working on this, they may be tempted to want to hold the legs apart for the other students. One of the reasons why this is likely going to be safer is that way there's less hands in there when cuts are being made and incisions are being made. And so if there are fewer hands in there when those things are happening, the less likely you'll have an injury.
Matt brings up a good point. One of the rules of the CDE that day that we're going to announce before each session is that we only are going to allow one student's hands on the fetal pig when the scalpel or scissors are being used. That way we're going to avoid potential fingers from getting in the way. So if you have one student cutting, it's only that student's hands that should be on the fetal pig. And that's what the string is going to help with. So one of the areas of identification on the fetal pig is the mouth cavity. I have a document that I'm looking at, and it actually gives a step-by-step procedure of how to do the dissection in both the mouth cavity and the abdominal cavity. I'm going to place that on the Agriscience CDE website, which is on the ALEC site, so you can print it, give it to your students, use it as a teaching tool in class, use it how you see fit. Because it also uses some of the language, medical terminology that's associated with dissection, so it'd be very good for your students to get used to in case they see any of them in any of the questions that are asked on either of the tests for the event. So to get started, to dissect the mouth cavity, I'm going to use the scalpel, and I'm going to start by making incisions at the corner of each mouth. Make sure your students watch where they put their finger, because the scalpels are sharp and they'll cut pretty quick. So after I've made the incision, you can have your students take their
Staff members, if you have Lily in your classroom, would you please buzz the office? Thank you.
You can have your students take their thumb and put it on the pig's tongue, and then they're actually going to take their other thumb and put it on the snout. And they're going to pull, and it's going to crack and make a sound. That's what you want to hear. That's going to help.
Page Franklin, if you're in the building, please page the office. Thank you.
And don't be shy. Just break it apart. It's okay. All right. So after you've done that, there's several areas of identification in the mouth. And it's going to be a little hard to see on this video, but we'll try our best. They may have to identify the teeth, which should be fairly straightforward. Then they have the hard palate, which if they take their thumb and put it on the palate, it's extremely hard. Right below the hard palate is the soft palate. If they take their finger or any of the instruments and press down, it should be almost like Jell-O. It's very soft. So those should be fairly easy for the students to identify. Then they're going to be responsible for identifying the nasal chamber as well as the tongue, which is right there. One thing with the tongue, that if the students want to, when they are preparing, if they want to make an incision and make the tongue a little looser, where they can get into that mouth cavity easier, that's all right. The handout that I'm going to put online goes through each step of this. I don't think you're going to be able to see the epiglottis very well here, but to see that, you're going to have to make sure that you've opened the mouth quite wide. And please ask questions as we go. So now, let's see. And there's also diagrams in the document that I'm going to put online. So any questions about the mouth cavity? All right. Hopefully the mouth cavity is pretty straightforward. So then we'll move to the fun part of the dissection, where your students get the opportunity to learn how to dissect the abdominal cavity. So the instructions are step-by-step and give precise directions. I am going to show you what it looks like. So to start with, when you make your first incision, be very careful not to go too deep, because you're going to rupture the organs. And once I start the incision, I recommend taking your scissors at that point because it's a lot easier to have a successful dissection without rupturing anything. The scalpel, it's much easier to cut through. When you get to the umbilical cord, I like to curve around it on both sides, and that's going to allow you to start to make a flap. So I'm going to point something out. If you can see this vein right here that I'm kind of holding up, that's the umbilical vein. Once your students identify that, it's okay if they take their scissors and cut it. That way, they can start to fold skin back. Then I would come back near the rib cage and make a flap. So just start cutting with the scissors carefully, not to hit the lungs or liver. There will most likely be fluid. They can kind of drain it or leave it.
Will they have most of the hour to complete this whole thing?
They will. They will. They'll get about 45 minutes. We need about that last 15 minutes for cleanup and to get everything set up for the next group. The 45 minutes and with the dissection, identification, and the few questions, I think is ample time for the students to do this. It does not take as long as you think once they've done it several times.
Yeah.
If it's the first time dissecting the fetal pig, it's going to take longer, but hopefully everyone has done it prior to the event. So my recommendation is, just for ease of getting into the organs, I just take the scissors, cut through the ribs, and then have that left over. That way you're going to see the organs better. I do that on both sides. That is totally up to you on how you want to teach your students. The challenge with the string is if you don't get it tight enough around the dissection tray, it comes off. All right. So now, for the most part, we've exposed the organs. So now your students, my suggestion would be first to have your students identify the organs when they're inside the cavity before they start to take them out, because I think if this is their first time doing it, it's going to be a little easier to learn what they are when they're in the cavity. Find where I am. So, if you'll notice, does anyone know what this organ is right here? Can you see that?
I can get this a little closer too. I'm going to move the camera, guys, so it's a little jostled here.
Matt, there's no way to make your screen full screen, I'm assuming, with your setup, is there?
Actually, if you pin the video, I've pinned the video for us for the recording purposes, but if you pin your video, then it should work. I'm going to flip this around so I can aim a little bit better for you. I apologize, guys. Let me I almost have it set. All right, there we go.
Okay. Oh, there it is. It's backwards.
Yeah, it's backwards. I needed to flip.
All right. Can you kind of see what I'm moving around there? That is the heart. And what surrounds the heart? The lungs. So you have the heart and the lungs. Then on the packet that I'm going to put online, it talks about the liver. I'll give you an example of what it might say. It says the liver will be the most obvious organ at the anterior end of the cavity. So they need to know what anterior means. They need to know that means towards the head. It is a large, firm, and typically dark brown in brown color, although it's sometimes green. Then it gives its function as well in the packet. So this liver.
Well, students need to know the function for the practicum.
For the practicum, students will need to know the function. There's going to be some multiple choice questions that are specifically associated with the function. And they're also fair game on the test that they take individually as well.
One second. Joel, to go back to your question about getting this to be full screen, on the top right of your Zoom window.
I got it fixed, Matt. Sorry.
During gallery view, switch it back to the other one, and that should allow you.
Yeah, I got it fixed. I knew I could do it. I just wasn't sure how there for a second. So.
Okay.
So then, can anyone tell what this organ is?
Underneath the liver?
Right underneath the liver.
I know.
Matt?
Is it the stomach?
Yes, you're correct. It is the stomach. And now I actually cut through just a little piece of the spleen. The spleen is a long, firm, feather-shaped organ, and it's just to the left side of the stomach. So I'm going to try to show it to you. It has a nice little tip like a feather, but mine does not because I cut it off. So when I was saying be very careful when your students cut, it's so easy to cut some of the organs. And it may just be that without that tip, that may not give the hint to the student that that's the spleen. Another trick with the spleen is when you touch it, it's very smooth. So just kind of have them touch it. Pet it a little bit, it'll be all right. And it's very smooth.
What about the gallbladder is attached to this, I believe. Is that an identified organ for the?
Yes, the gallbladder. Let's see where it is on my list. I always look back at that. So the gallbladder is immediately underneath the liver. It's normally embedded in its underside. So it's often greenish in color. So you have the liver. One of these. I'm looking for the gallbladder.
It's usually, I've always seen it attached to the stomach. It's kind of a green.
Yes,
between the stomach and the liver. Look above the stomach. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
There. Yep.
Here is the gallbladder. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see what I'm? That's the gallbladder. So that could be potentially challenging to identify, especially if you've incorrectly cut. Okay. So we did the spleen, we did the lungs and the heart and the liver and the gallbladder. Let's see. So then we have the intestines. So we have the small intestines and then the large intestines. So at the junction of the small and large intestines is the cecum. So try to help your students identify the cecum. Your handout's going to tell you it's a bag-like structure equivalent to our appendix. So what's nice about this handout is it kind of gives you instructions on where things are. Because the cecum is sometimes hard to find for me anyway.
It's just not too big on a monogastric.
No.
Unless you're a horse.
I am not seeing. Yeah.
I think you ruptured the large intestine.
I ruptured the large intestine, so we will just move on because we're going to have a mess on our hands. But I did locate the kidneys.
So I think the kidneys could be a potentially difficult one for students to identify. They're embedded into the back wall of the abdomen. They don't stick out like the rest of the organs.
But if they move the intestines around a little bit, that's when they're going to be able to identify the kidney and see it. But it is possible that they kind of just look over it for the reasons Matt just said. But if you start cutting through some of the tissue, you can actually remove the kidney with your fingers pretty easy. Let's see. So the pancreas. So at the base of the stomach is where the pancreas is. Let's see if we can find that.
As Dr. Connor is looking for this, just another note too. This year there'll be a surcharge on this event for the teams to help offset the cost of these fetal pigs. These fetal pigs are like $20 or $25. You recall?
They're right under $25.
And so this is always an expensive event, but we don't typically spend $25 a team, and so there will be a surcharge on top of the typical per student fee for the Agriscience CDE for this year. Once we go down to a cheaper specimen practicum, we'll next year probably we'll return it to just the per student fee. Typically, there are about 90 different teams that participate in this event as well, and the growing number of programs in Nebraska, that might be even more. And given the topic, everyone's excited to dissect a fetal pig, so you may have more than 100 this year, Dr. Connor. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I think we will. I think I cut through the pancreas. What I will do for you is I will put on the website a list of all the organs that could potentially be on the CDE for your students to identify. But when you're helping your students with this, I would have them start to cut organs out, have them take the lungs out, the liver out, the heart out, and actually look at them very well. I'll take just a little bit of the liver out just to show you. It's all very simple to do.
Some other things, as he's doing that, that's nice to point out for students. Of course, oh, there you got it. Very good. Pretty large.
Yes. And if you want to identify the different lobes, That's a great educational thing to do. I'm not going to ask that on the CDE, though.
Now, can you point out the diaphragm, Dr. Connor?
Yeah, right here.
Another good conversation point when teaching is the diaphragm, which separates the chest cavity from the abdomen, if it also regulates and helps assisting in terms of with breathing too. And so it's a good conversation point in terms of that lungs will only fill up with oxygen if the diaphragm's intact. You find the cecum with that now?
That's what
I bet that's it right there.
Here.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
cecum.
it's centered on the screen.
Right there. That's the cecum.
Now, are all these fetal pigs, are they all the same gender, or?
I did not purposely order the same gender. So far, we have only seen female fetal pigs come out of our boxes. I believe Carolina does sell males, and I didn't specifically ask for females. It's just what I was sent. And I have not ordered them all for the CDE yet, so I think it's pretty fair game that it could be male or it could be female.
Okay. Will there be any external anatomy that students are expected to do? Are you going to have them identify the vulva, or even going back to the head, the nares, or things of that nature?
On the actual dissection part, there will not be any external anatomy. On the individual test, there could be in multiple choice question format. So do you have any questions about the dissection? I could take this further out. If you would like me to, I can. I would highly suggest your students doing that. And it's going to help them identify.
Anything that people would like to take a closer look at, or questions you have? Another thing is the bladder. We could point that out, and that might be another potential that you might see on this. The bladder is actually, it's right there, where your finger is at, right there. And it's in between a couple of veins that go to the umbilical cord, in fact. And so, anyway, that's another potential option. What about like lobes of the heart? Would they be asked to identify?
I was not planning on asking.
Okay.
for the lobes.
Okay. Or ventricles, I guess I should say.
And I'll put a list online of all the things you could be asked for.
Could you zoom in or show the heart and lungs again?
Yeah.
I'm going to move this thing again down
I'll
closer.
we'll show them, then I'll cut them out. So the heart is right here. And then the lungs are all around it. So you could have your students take their scissors and carefully remove the heart. And you can do the same thing with the lungs if you like. When I did this similar type of workshop at P2C with high school students, we cut everything out, even the brain. So there's a lot you can do with this.
As you're teaching to this in your intro to ag class, I'd encourage you that maybe the students would do a little bit of research, maybe as individuals or small groups, to learn a little bit about the lungs. So it's not just the lungs, but what comprises the lungs, loss of villi, and what does that consist of? And as you teach it, you might have the different students, then that's their opportunity to present, or through conversation, however, about a little bit more about those organs. For the CDE, it sounds like it's about general identification and general function. But
function and identification, primarily due to time of the practicums, with so many chapters coming through.
So as you teach it in your class, I think there's opportunities to extend that, and I'd recommend putting it back on the students. With a little bit of independent research, maybe an independent research day, you divide out the organs, and then when they dissect, they'll have an opportunity to teach the class the deeper parts of their particular organ.
And there's also different things you could do to set up learning activities that are inquiry in nature with the dissection, for you to really be very educational and purposeful when the students are dissecting. For the purpose of this today, we just showed you how you might make the dissection and where the organs are located. But it would be very beneficial for your students to go much deeper and develop different types of inquiry-based learning. Maybe it's some type of experiment that they could do while they're dissecting the pig to take it deeper, and they can make hypotheses and collect data and solve and draw conclusions from that data.
Also, it's an opportunity to talk about meat evaluation, and if you taught meats up to before this, it'd be a review. If you haven't, just talk about where some of the cuts would come from on the animal too. So lots of extensions, definitely, and you will not have an issue keeping students' attention when you're dissecting pigs. That typically, when I would do this would last a week, and one day would be the mouth, and we'd get really in deep with that. The next day would be the chest cavity, and then we might spend a couple days on the abdomen. I would demonstrate with a document camera like this, and then the students would go ahead and do it. It was very methodical, and
you could go further than that. You could do a day on muscle tissue and the veins. There's all sorts of things you can do with this. And Carolina Biological does sell a little book for $15 or $20 that goes through each system of the fetal pig. So there's activities that you can develop based off that material.
I'm going to switch you back to this camera.
All right.
So,
are there any questions?
So, some critical things just to review, in addition to the practicum itself. Preparing for that exam is critical, and based on the chapters that have been identified. The home-based practica, which is that career report, how would you say that, what is the deciding factor typically? You've been through this 1 year, Dr. Connor, in being a superintendent for this event. Where did the biggest difference maker make between teams or individuals?
Well, last year, due to the nature of the live practicum, I would say it was either the exam or the career reports. Most likely it was the exam, the individual exam, because we had some teams where every student scored very high on that individual exam. We had other teams where every student scored extremely low on the exam, so that hurt their entire team.
Very good. Well, last opportunity for questions. If there are, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. All right. Well, if not, looks like we had some other extra visitors join us today, future Agriscience CDE participants. But thank you all very much for attending. This will be posted online. so you can use again or review or have your students take a look as they're learning and preparing. But thank you, Dr. Connor, for your time today, and thanks everyone for joining us. Take care.
Thank you guys very much.